You're watching the Mending Roots to Cultivate Communities telethon, coming live from the Denver Community Media Studios in downtown Denver.
Hi there, my name is Vic. I'm the president of the Gifford Gun Owners for Safety Colorado chapter and a proud board member of the Mending Roots Forest Project. In 2011, while meeting with her constituents at a grocery store in Tucson, Arizona, Gabby Gifford was shot in the head. 17 others were injured and 6 people died, including Christina Green, who was just 9 years old. Since that tragic day, Gabby has found the courage to learn how to read, write, and walk again. However, her recovery didn't stop there. She ended up launching a national movement to prevent gun violence in America. I'm happy to introduce you to Gabby as she talks about the importance of her fight.
It's time for courage. We must do something. We must stop gun violence. Protect our children, our future, let them lead the way. Make our country a safer place, a better place. Do you have the courage to fight? Please join your voice with mine.
I'm a gun owner.
I'm a gun owner.
I'm a gun owner.
And we're committed to gun safety.
Gun ownership is woven into our history as a country, a fundamental right for generations of people from all backgrounds and political affiliations. Gifford's Gun Owners for Safety unites a community of hunters, sport shooters, and collectors who understand the need for common sense gun laws to help keep us all safe. As gun owners, we value the right to own a gun and also understand our responsibility in ensuring all guns are used and stored properly. It's time to use our voice to push for solutions that will save lives and preserve our rights. We believe the Second Amendment is an important right. We also believe our communities should be safer from gun violence. If you only listen to the corporate gun lobby or partisan politicians, you'd think these two values are at odds. But gun owners from all 50 states are joining together to say that gun rights and gun safety go hand in hand. Responsible gun owners across the country are showing that we're not as divided as we seem.
As a responsible gun owner,
I am committed to gun safety.
join us.
Join us.
Join us in the fight for gun safety.
Here's all.
And we're back. That's a cliche rejoin. No, I am not Ron Burgundy. I am Orrin Lamena, and I am joined by Vic Bencomo, who is the president of the Gifford's Gun Owners for Safety organization.
Yep.
Which we just heard from. And it's interesting to have you here on this occasion. There was a conversation that we had initially when we saw that, when we saw your promo, that was, I wonder how this sits in the midst of this conversation. And then I had to ask myself the question, because I am a Second Amendment advocate. I believe the right to defend yourself is one that we should all. But when you think about, Representative Gifford's, story and, how that unfolded, and we were all shocked, you know what I mean? That it touched the world of politics. Not that it had been the first time, but, Kathy Giffords was definitely very high profile. And the fact that she survived that entire ordeal was just like, whoa, this is how close it can get. And the conversation that we're having usually affects youth, and then if we're talking about youth, maybe we're talking about maybe more inner city urban youth than we're talking about maybe suburban youth. And then you have gun rights advocates that sit somewhere in the middle. And half the time, you know, when something happens, you have the community that, you know, they belt out, you know, take guns away. And then you have, you know, certain Second Amendment advocates that are like, no, we need these. And then there are people like yourselves who support responsible gun ownership and can support a cause like this. Explain how you got involved first and foremost with the
Absolutely.
with Giffords. And
First of all, thank you so much for having
Thank
us
you
here.
for being here.
This is such an important event for us to be part of.
For sure.
I'm not only the president of Colorado Giffords Gun Ownership, I'm also, which I'm really proud of, the newest board member for Mending Roots Forest Project. So I'm really excited about this. This is a very passionate project that I really believe needs to be here. Look, let's be honest. After Gabby recovered, she wanted to do something big.
Mm-hmm.
And she knew she wanted to do something about gun violence. Mm-hmm. She also realized that she couldn't do this without having gun owners with her. In order to start the movement, she needed to bring gun owners on board to really make this happen. So 3 years ago, I'm sitting in a room with Gabby and her husband, then Mark Kelly, which was an astronaut at the time.
Yeah.
And the three of us were sitting down, and Gabby said, hey, I need somebody to help me in Colorado to push the movement. And the reason why I got involved, first of all, I'm a volunteer. I don't get paid. Like, I do this because of the passion that I have.
Absolutely.
But what Mark told me was this. He said, the work you're doing today is going to make an impact on somebody, but you're never going to know who that person is.
For sure.
But the reality is you're going to save one life. And if you save one life, that person's going to go on, get married, and have 2 kids or 3 kids, and they're going to have kids. And before you know it, you didn't save one life, you saved an entire generation.
That's right.
A generation. So I am so happy that the Giffords are willing to put time into a community-based project of Mending Roots. It's not often that an organization, especially a national organization, right, will come in and say, look, we really want to do something right for the youths. We want to do something right with the community, do something right with the youth, and we want it to be a community-based organization.
Right.
And that's what this is. And that's why this project is so important, because we as a community get to decide what's going to happen to us, right?
For sure.
So, but to your point, your original question is, why did I get involved, right?
Yes.
So I spent 22 years in the military. I got out, and I was disenfranchised in seeing how many Americans were being shot on the streets. If you look at how many Americans have been killed from gun violence, just gun violence, I'm not talking about mass shootings, I'm not talking about gang violence, I'm talking about domestic violence, I'm talking about suicide, veteran suicide, I'm talking about all of it, right? You put all those numbers together, that's more people than we lost since Vietnam. And this is America, y'all. Like, this should not be happening in our country.
Agreed.
So my organization, we believe in the Second Amendment. We are not, the NRA does not speak for us. Right conservative groups do not speak for us, nor do the left liberal groups speak for us. We are moderate gun owners that believe we need to have sensible gun legislation in order to have the ability for humans to be able to do whatever the heck they want. There's no reason why you should go to your house of worship and be shot. There's no reason why a young man should be able to go into a grocery store for whatever reasons and shoot people up.
That's right.
And look, since 2 weeks ago, we've had so many mass shootings. So our organization—
45, I believe, is the number since the beginning of the year.
Come on. You tell me that when a vape goes bad and we got 6 people dying because the vape didn't work,
right,
and it's a epidemic, man, gun violence is an epidemic across the board. And you know, there's many different facets of gun violence prevention. There's many different organizations looking to either ban a specific weapon, they want to do this and that. What we do really is work with our legislators to come up with sensible gun laws that are here to help to try to prevent gun violence.
Right.
The opposition will say that we're infringing on your Second Amendment right. We're not. And I don't follow that narrative. I'm not going to fight that narrative. If you're somebody that really believes a no compromise is where you're at, you and I aren't going to, we don't even have a place to start.
Right.
And it's not on me. So So here's the deal. I can talk a mile a minute. So if you want to ask
I'm
another
with
question.
it. Well, see, here's what I was going to ask you, because you said moderate, and these conversations are nuanced, and there's no longer room for nuance in
Right.
in our discourse, right? You're here or you're there. How do you square the circle of responsible gun ownership and keeping the guns out of the hands of kids? How do you square the circle of the right to defend one's home versus let's know who has these guns and what hands they might fall into based upon the person that has it? And knowing that, like what happened in Boulder, responsible gun ownership could prevent a lot of tragedies as much as irresponsible gun ownership contributes to tragedy. So in this conversation, that is very nuanced, to hear you, evoke the word moderate is refreshing to me, actually, because I think we've gotten to the point where we act like we can't walk and chew gum at the same time, right? Like two things can't exist in the same space, that we can't have a conversation that includes responsibility and abstaining from letting people have and own guns that have no business.
So here's the thing about that, right? When we talk about gun legislation, people immediately start to begin to think that we need to be restrictive. We need to get rid of firearms.
Right.
There is a balance. We have in our Second Amendment the ability to have firearms since the inception of this country.
For sure.
Where it changes is when we are seeing a large amount of deaths through an epidemic. So what we try to do is training, education, and again, working with our legislators. So here's a perfect example. We passed a law 3 years ago in Colorado, ERPO, or red flag law. The law got passed. However, there wasn't enough funding to do a really great campaign to educate the community, right? Mm-hmm. So let's take the Boulder example just for a minute here. That young man shows up all of a sudden one day with a firearm, and his family are like, that's interesting. He never had one of those before.
Sure.
What's going on there? Possibly, if they were more educated about, or anybody was educated about the ERPO law, potentially they could have made a phone call and they could have helped report that and defuse the situation. So when we're talking about gun violence prevention, it's not only about passing legislation, it's about mental health. It's about drug abuse.
Right.
It's about working with the community. We know, and this is why Mending Roots is so important. We know statistically, if a community has the ability to provide its youths with opportunity, take mental health and drug addiction and mental health issues seriously, and provide an opportunity for them, they will gravitate to those areas versus areas where they can find crime.
Well, because when you sit on the board of the Mending Roots Forest Foundation, it's like that is a juxtaposition that's hard for some people to square because they don't feel like the two conversations can exist within the same space. If we're protecting kids, then guns need to be out of the conversation. And then to have anyone who is in support of any gun ownership, let alone responsible gun ownership, you're speaking to, you don't know your audience.
Sure.
Which again to me is a little short-sighted of where we can find consensus. I'm going to bring your partner, Whitney. I'm going to Tautenhoft.
Good enough. It's all right.
I was close. As someone who's had his first name butchered and it's Oren, I apologize.
No worries at all.
Let's bring you into this conversation, Whitney, because as we're talking about responsible gun ownership, juxtaposed to National Youth Violence Prevention Week, and knowing that guns in the hands of youth, used responsibly, if they're not hunters, if they're not avid hunters, I don't think that fits in that conversation. Explain what you do with the Gibberish Foundation.
So I got involved with Gun Owners for Safety about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
I've done biathlon most of my life since I was like 8, which is, for those who don't know, it's cross-country skiing and shooting. And so my family has owned rifles for that sport all of my life. And so technically we were gun owners, but didn't always necessarily I don't know, identify with the term gun owner because it carries a lot of weight and often is, compared to the NRA, and we didn't feel like the NRA represented us as gun owners. So I ended up actually finding out about Gun Owners for Safety just like through Instagram, saw it on someone's story, and then showed up at one of the meetings and got involved there. So.
Should gun owners have a voice in a conversation as sensitive as youth gun violence?
Absolutely, I think as a young person and a gun owner, I think that gun owners often are the people who understand guns the most and understand, like how different laws will affect them and affect other gun owners, and so I think it's very important to have them at the decision-making table.
The youth who are often stigmatized or categorized or lumped into youth gun violence wouldn't be your traditional responsible gun owner. Many times these weapons are procured through nefarious means. They're not legal. Where does that, in the conversations that you've been having, where does that sift out? How do you introduce responsible gun ownership into a conversation that usually isn't with your traditional gun owner?
We have to stop the stereotype.
Okay.
Right? Because I think that's one of the biggest problems. When we look at gun owners, we think of a 60-year-old man, NRA, white guy, has guns, right? That's not the reality. Guns are everywhere.
They are.
And our youth, especially in underprivileged, underserved communities, are able to get these firearms and use them, unfortunately, not all the time, but let's just call it what it is. Sometimes it's a violent situation, right?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about gun legislation or gun violence prevention, you have to look at the whole holistic picture.
Absolutely.
Why is it happening? Well, as a national organization, we have a responsibility to ensure that gun legislation gets passed, right? But we also have a responsibility to our communities. And how does that work? Well, the same legislators that I'm working with every single day, the same legislators that we're working with that are working to change gun violence in Colorado and Denver are the same people that are going to raise the minimum wage to $15. They're the same people that are going to put money into the communities, the black and brown communities, to provide for infrastructure, for churches, for youth programs. So we have a responsibility to look at the picture holistically and not only be laser focused on firearms, because that is not the only issue.
Of course.
And if we don't look at it as a whole and we don't bring these groups in and build a coalition, we're never going to move the needle. So it's bigger than gun violence. And I'm not saying that gun violence isn't a problem.
I mean, it's a huge problem. I mean,
we got a lot of other problems that we need to look holistically, and as we do our advocacy work, bringing the right groups at the right time,
bringing people to the table that can actually
the right
affect
advocates
change.
To meet with our leadership to make the change for our communities, and that's why Mending Roots is so important.
Whitney, excuse me. Responsible gun ownership, Mending Roots, and the mission to honor the lives of the fallen youth, many of them inner city, urban. Is there a place, have you guys envisioned teaching responsible gun ownership in urban circumstances, in inner city circumstances? Is that something that you envision as being a part of this sort of binding between the two missions?
So we have multiple missions, and one of our biggest missions is training and education. So we see this as an opportunity first, as a place of solace, right? This is a place where we're going to come, unfortunately, to grieve and to be memorized of the situations that these poor survivors are dealing with. But when the time is right and there are opportunities, we will absolutely be willing to educate and train in regards to proper gun ownership and gun safety. But I don't think that's here today, right?
We're far ways off. We are a ways from being able to. It's just such a touchy subject. When you're hearing from, we have James on, or you have victims calling in, and nobody wants to hear about the responsible side of gun ownership when we're talking about lives lost to gun violence. How old are you, Whitney?
I'm 17.
Okay, so when you talk to your counterparts, when you're talking to your peers, How is this conversation shaped amongst your peers?
I mean, it's interesting because I definitely think that a lot of people my age who don't know much about gun ownership, see it as all bad and see it as like the problem is gun ownership itself, when I think that actually that's not the most effective way to, try to combat the issue is just by like painting it out to be all negative, but really working from within. And so that's, I agree that probably one of the best things that we can do is educate and educate from the inside, educate the people who actually have guns, not tell people that guns are horrible, because the only way that we're going to save lives is if you actually make sure that guns are properly stored, guns are properly handled, and you can't do that unless you're actually appealing to gun owners and youth.
That's, I think that and hearing your perspective on it is important, because it's not one that we get to hear from young people often. Vic, in the time that we have left, let's talk about the Mending Roots Project and just how important this phase of, where we're at, we're raising money, but how important giving voice to those grieving is in order for us to reach a place where we can then talk about things like responsible gun ownership.
If you've never experienced a loss through gun violence, if you've never had a loved one taken because of senseless acts, because of domestic violence, because of suicide, you can only provide empathy, but you don't really understand how deep and how big this is, right? In order for us to be able to stop gun violence, especially in urban communities, we really need to work with our youths. We really need to train them, educate them on other options that are out there. So the Mending Roots Project in itself is going to allow us to give a catalyst to our community. As I said it before, this is a community base. We get to decide how this manages and how this works.
Right.
And this isn't only about planting trees. This isn't about environmental. This is about a community coming together to put together a concept and an idea, which will then allow it to grow. And these are what the roots are all about.
Right.
The roots are going to go to the churches. The roots are going to go to the communities. The roots is going to go to the small business owner that can't find anybody work. But you know what? Mending Roots has got 5 kids that are looking for jobs today. And if you're willing to give them one, that's a great opportunity for them. So this is about community-based project for our community here in Park Hill. If I may, I know we're short. You have to give. This doesn't come free. And we really need your support. But I'll tell you what, if you can't, I know times are tough. We're coming out of a really, really tough time this year. If you can't provide funds, provide yourself.
Give your time.
Give your time. Look, on 5/1, we're going to go out there and plant 200 trees. Send me your kids. We will teach them how to plant trees. And if you play an instrument, come on out and play an instrument. And if you think you're just too old, you're not. You got more knowledge than we do. Come pass out water and to the folks that are digging holes and help us out. Because this is a community. And we need you in the community to support this project. And that will allow us to grow.
Vic, Whitney, thank you so much for adding your voice to this conversation. And we'd like to thank, obviously, the Gibberish Foundation is the sponsor of this event and of the Mending Roots push. And we are encouraging everyone to donate. Donate your time, donate your voice, donate your money if you have it. We know you just got your stimmy. I'm going with that, K-Tone. It works. Donate now. MendingRootsForest.com/donate. We really appreciate you guys coming out and
Thank
being
you.
with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Hello all, this is Susie Q. Smith from Denver, Colorado, specifically Park Hill, reading for the Mending Roots Forest Project event, the live stream Mending Roots to Cultivate Communities. This poem that I'm going to share with you is called For Cedric. During senior year of high school, a boy that I grew up with was shot at a local shopping mall. The next day at school, a girl I had never spoken to approached me, concern in her brow, asking sweetly, "How's your friend?" I was moved by her empathy. An exotic bird in a beige land of suburban track houses, I answered, "He's still in critical condition, but we're all praying. My grandmother is down at the hospital now." She, head bobbing hair flip, smile shifting into quiet knife, replied, "Well, I still say if he was a gang member, he deserved to get shot." This poem is for Michelle Albright and What We Deserve. You deserved both of my hands around your throat that day and the shaking I gave you. You probably still live in some suburb somewhere in a house just like the one you grew up in. You are probably married to an insurance agent who played high school ball and still reminisces when he drinks too much on the weekends. You are probably a banker, a mortgage lender who gets rich by manipulating poor people. You probably have 2 kids who look exactly like you. You probably think that they deserve the best. Michelle. You never knew Cedric, never saw the bruises he or his sister wore to Sunday school, never tried not to fall asleep in the all-night prayer sessions the adults in our families held in hopes of protecting them from their stepfather, never prayed for him to get saved. You never curled inside the kindness of his mother, never grew roots in the forest of her song. You did not come to our reunions or revivals, never heard the desperation in our melody. You have never been unable to afford the arrogance of your godlessness, Michelle. You never saw Cedric smile. You never wept or prayed for him. You never tried to beat him in a foot race. You never knew why his manhood was so urgent or why it cost him so much blood to achieve. Michelle, I want you to know that he did survive, and that when he recovered, he reclaimed his manhood the only way he knew how, that he was 17 when they locked him away for good, and the last time I saw him was at his mother's funeral. We were 18 then. They did not unshackle his hands nor his feet as he rattled to the pulpit to read a poem he had written for his dead mother, and all I could think about was you and what you said he deserved, Michelle. I still see his aunties and uncles and cousins sometimes. He is his family's phantom limb, but I know better than to stare or talk about it. My family has missing teeth of its own, Michelle. I'm a mother now, and every night when I listen at my daughter's door, I can tell through the door the difference between asleep breathing, and awake pretending to be asleep breathing. I've kissed her head and toes, cleaned her messes, read her books, wrote her lullabies, taught her to ride a bicycle and to swim, helped with homework, talked down teachers, spoken to the mothers of bullies, spoken to bullies, prayed and prayed and prayed. Michelle, I taught her to read. I taught her to speak up, even to me. I have washed and matched her socks over and over again, have had to send her out into a world that does not value her life, that would tell her something about inferiority and it belonging to her, about her body and identity and it belonging to them, that pretends that black lives are not as carefully cultivated as white lives, as if she is not the most loved child that has ever lived. Michelle, I wonder what you think she deserves, Michelle. I know Cedric's mother felt the same way about her son that I do about my daughter. Michelle, what do you teach your babies? Michelle, do you know what a victim is? Do you think they always look like you? Michelle, have you ever felt like a statistic? Michelle, do you know they make whole juries just like you? Michelle, do you know the smack of a gavel can crack a spirit in half? Michelle, do you have a spirit? Michelle, we all deserve better than this. Even you.
Hi, my name is Maritza Valenzuela. I work at Denver Public Health on youth violence prevention, and I am mending roots to cultivate community through public health. Public health is about improving the well-being of whole communities, and we all know that violence is detrimental to everyone's well-being, but violence is also preventable. Through a public health approach, we seek to prevent violence before it happens, support the needs of young people, and address the root causes of the systems that were here long before we were. Through a public health approach, we can mend those roots and cultivate healthy and safe communities. And that's what I'm working towards.
Hi, my name is Ayuri Toribio and I am a youth leader for the Southwest Villa newsletter. I am mending roots to cultivate communities.
My name is Pearl Lopez. I am the program manager with Denver Police Department District 4 on the community-based crime reduction grant in Westwood, Denver. We are mending roots to cultivate communities.
I'm Kristen Ross and I'm the Communities That Care mobilizer for Southwest Denver, and I'm mending roots to cultivate communities.
My name is Chris Herndon. I serve on Denver City Council, and we are mending roots to cultivate communities.
My name is Dane Washington, and we are mending roots to cultivate communities.
Hi, my name is Aaliyah Quinby. I'm a youth representative on the Mayor's Youth Commission, and I am mending roots to cultivate communities. So I'm a part of the Youth Gun Violence Prevention Committee, and within the past couple of years, we've administered a survey to collect general data and have shared it with community members and organizations. We also hosted a town hall last year where we discussed general questions about gun violence in order to inform the public. This year, we're hosting another town hall on April 14th, which by the time you're watching this will have already passed. And the goal of this forum is to be youth-led and to connect organizations from around Denver in order to foster collaboration among these efforts. We're also hosting a Safe Summer campaign where we're encouraging community members to come together and organize events to promote a safer Denver community. Thank you so much for your support and your ongoing efforts to combat gun violence.
Mending Roots to Cultivate Community Telethon. Live from Denver Community Media Studio, I am Oren Lamena, and I am joined by Jess Price, who is the president of Moms Demand Action Everytown. You're the president of the Aurora.
That's
faction.
right. I'm the local group lead for Aurora.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
In talking in the break, I found that we have a lot of cross-sectionalities in terms of you're a teacher.
Yes.
At Overland High School.
That is correct.
A school that my daughter attended for 2 years of her high school career.
I love that.
But a school also that is kind of not the poster child, but it's represented sort of the change that we're seeing. Not the change in Aurora. Gun violence isn't new to Aurora, but the Cherry Creek side, the Cherry Creek corridor of that district. And well, first and foremost, how did you get involved with Moms Demand Action?
So I got involved right after the Parkland shooting.
Okay.
I think I was just really moved and motivated by the students getting involved. I mean, here they are in the midst of this tragedy, in the midst of this trauma, and they're stepping up and stepping out and talking about ways to end gun violence, meeting with their legislators. I mean, in the immediate aftermath, and as a high school teacher who teaches government and teaches about the importance of getting involved, in my head I'm thinking, if they're doing this in the midst of this trauma and tragedy, then it's time that I step up. And so I found the closest Moms Demand Action meeting to me at the time, which was in Castle Rock.
Okay.
And my sister and I drove to Castle Rock, and we said, well, and it was a huge meeting, and all these people who just wanted to be part of the solution and really wanted to start, trying to tackle this problem of ending gun violence. And we said, well, why isn't there a group in Aurora? And they said, because nobody's ever started one. And so my sister and I looked at each other and said, we can start one. And we did. And so that was shortly after Parkland, and it grew really, really fast. Mm-hmm. We worked really hard to make it accessible to so many different people in Aurora. That's what I love about living in Aurora the most, is how diverse it is. And so we were very strategic in terms of who we got involved and how we got people involved and where we were meeting and when we were meeting, so that we could attract people from all walks of life. And in a really short amount of time, our group grew, and we became a kind of a powerful force in Aurora, and joined with all of the other groups and started really pushing some smart legislation. And it's just grown way bigger than what her and I ever thought it possibly could. She actually now works for Everytown.
Wow.
And runs all of the volunteers in 13 states. And so it started as, one Sunday afternoon saying, let's do this. And it kind of has taken over my world. And so it's been really awesome.
When you talk about how it caught on,
it's
indicative, almost of the, people will stand in a crowd and everyone watches. And no one really wants to say anything until the first person says something.
Yeah.
Then everyone feels empowered to say something. And to take that step out, as you all did, and then create a faction in Aurora, and then to watch the response, that had to be rewarding. And also probably a good indicator that people are ready to start lending their voices to this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But for the youth, and you were inspired by the youth.
Yeah.
Have you noticed ways that are effective for adults to allow space for them to have their voice, and yet still impart to them the wisdom that we might be able to bring to the table from our, that conversation can kind of be kind of sticky.
Yeah.
And then even in talking to one of our guests, talking to Dane Washington Jr., it's just like, give the kids the stage, give the youth the stage, let them speak their truth. How best have you seen, what best practices could you give for integrating the two sides of the conversation?
I mean, I think that Dane's right. I think you have to allow kids to have the space to tell their stories. The stories that they come to me with in my own classroom at Overland are phenomenal. I mean, we have kids from all over the world who lived the first, 10, 12 years of their life in a refugee camp and ended up at Overland High School not speaking a word of English, not even knowing what it's like to go to a public school. And, when you can listen to their stories and listen to their backgrounds and listen to the experiences they've had with gun violence or in other things, it is so empowering to them when you listen and you care about their stories. And then I think it gives you the opportunity to form that relationship. We say at Overland all the time that the most important thing at Overland is forming relationships with our students. That without the relationship, they're never going to want to listen to you. And so we spend a tremendous amount of time forming relationships with our students and listening to their stories. And, sometimes I probably surprise people at the connections that I make with my students who come from totally different backgrounds than I do, who look very different than I do. And yet we have been able to figure out how to understand each other, and I feel like I have been welcomed kind of into their world. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of respect between the two of us in terms of the experiences that they've had and the knowledge that I bring just in the work that I've done with gun violence prevention. It's been so much fun to see the connections that we've all been able to make with each other. Even just sitting down with you and realizing like, oh yeah, we know each other from, walking in and seeing all these people that I know from all these different gun violence prevention, organizations. It makes a huge difference. And our youth see that. I mean, they just want to know that you care. They don't care what I look like. They don't care what my experience is. If they know that I genuinely care and want to be part of the solution, they know it.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
You know what? Oftentimes, our commonalities are so much more in volume than our differences. Our differences come down to things like skin tone, which is one aspect of life, or economic strata at times, socioeconomic status in terms of what neighborhood did you grow up. But people are people, and pain is pain.
Yeah.
We were talking about an incident that happened at Overland, and it's hard to imagine, and I know my alma mater, or no longer, it's Far Northeast High School now, but I graduated from Montbello and definitely has seen its share of youth violence. A school gets rocked. These young people, are just embarking on their lives scholastically and learning how to, interact with one another. And then to have something of the nature like the shooting that happened across the street from Overland. How do you deal with that in comforting and consoling these kids, giving them their space, but also trying to provide solutions going forward for conflict resolution for young people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard. I mean, we are, as teachers, and at Overland especially, I feel like we are constantly having to figure out, like, how are we going to deal with whatever incident it happens to be? Oftentimes it's a shooting, or it's an event going on nationally, or just an event going on within our own school. I mean, we're constantly put in that position. And I think that the best thing that I do as a teacher, and I think what just makes a difference, is to open it up to the kids and say, let's talk about this a little bit. Like, what do you guys want to talk about? And you would tell me what are you thinking? What are you feeling? And let's, talk about what do we do next? And just giving them the space, I also think it's important to give them the space sometimes not to talk about it. Sometimes our kids, I think that we as teachers want them just to keep talking about the same event over and over and over again. And so I also always make sure that I'm pretty respectful in terms of, if you guys don't want to talk about this right now, that's cool too. Like, maybe we'll talk about it next week. Maybe we're not going to talk about it right this second. That you have to really be in tuned to their cues and kind of see, like, where is this going? Is this something that they want to do right now or not? It's an extremely challenging job.
Sure.
But so rewarding at the same time. And you know, our kids at Overland, and this is something I've talked a lot with Jason McBride about, that I am working with kids who are the victims of gun violence, and then I am also working with the kids who are the perpetrators of gun violence. And that is just a whole nother thing. I mean, it's extremely difficult.
This is the path that you've chosen, and we all are. My mother was an educator. She worked in the college side of things. She was a professor of nutrition at University of Northern Colorado. But anybody who will dedicate their time to the teaching of young people, to me, is a saint, because it comes with more than just the information that you're to impart to them and getting them to graduate.
Yeah.
You become a second step parent. In some cases, you might be the first step that these kids have. When you've seen some of these harder cases, and is it easy for these kids to approach? Have you felt like there is space for the perpetrators or the would-be perpetrators of these crimes? Because the victims are easy to sort of address. How do we address the people that are the would-be offenders?
I think it's really, really hard. I mean, especially because oftentimes the ones who are the perpetrators of the gun violence, the victims are also in the same building.
Absolutely.
They're all in the same school together.
Absolutely.
And so it can be really tricky. I mean, those issues of retaliation are no joke with our students. I mean, it is very serious. And trying to talk kids through things like that, especially with somebody that I don't have a ton of background in gun violence myself, like I know the stats and, I can talk with legislators about, common sense gun legislation, but to really talk about some of those real issues like, Ms. Price, how do I not retaliate against this kid? And I'm just looking at them like,
You know what it brings to mind? Last Juneteenth.
Yeah.
And I was doing, just getting ready for the show, and it was brought to my attention that, well, the perpetrator of that crime has yet to have been caught, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, what is the conversation like amongst the youth? Because the buzz, what we heard is that COVID and the way that last year's school year ended didn't provide enough time for redress of grievances, let's call it that. And so, you got a confluence of young people that get together, and a good situation goes bad real fast.
Yeah.
The threat of retaliation, the threat of retribution, the want for some get back is something that, it's almost like, poetic in a young person's mind. I was grieved, or my person was grieved, or my people were grieved, and I'm gonna get some get back. Yeah. It's gotta be a task. It's gotta be a challenge for you to operate within such a touchy space where you don't know who the perpetrator is. You don't know when the next shots are around the corner. Yeah. How do you, as a human being, cope with the environment that school has become?
It's really hard. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's the hardest thing in the world to know that there's only so much I can do, that I can try to give kids space to talk. I can try to talk with them, making sure that they're aware of, like, this is what could happen if this is what happens, But at the end of the day, kids are kids, and kids don't always make great decisions, even when given all the information. And so you really, there's so many moments of walking away thinking, please don't let me see that kid on the news tonight.
Yeah.
Every single time I hear on the news, which is daily, that there's been another shooting in Aurora, another shooting in, by, I live in Peoria, which is close to my high school, and my husband is also an educator, and we both just immediately pause and just look, and please don't be one of our students. Please don't be one of our kids, because it's all the time. It happens all the time. It's hard. I mean, it takes an emotional toll on you, and I think all of us in the gun violence prevention movement, like, you do have to be careful about making sure that you're taking care of yourself, because this is an extremely difficult topic. It's a very heavy topic, and it's no joke, and you have to be ready at all times, because you just never know when something's going to happen.
Yeah,
you know?
The situation seems exacerbated by the times that we're living in, but we are very thankful of people like yourself and your husband that dedicate themselves to, first the tutelage of our young people, but also inserting yourself in that deeper level, which is growing up human beings, helping us raise functional human beings.
Yeah, I try. I don't know. This hasn't been a great year. I've got to be honest with you.
It's been a hard one. It's been a hard one. Well, thank you so much for your service and your time.
Thank you so much. And thanks for everything you guys are doing. This is so important and can make a huge difference.
Most definitely. Yeah. And if I heard correctly while we were in the break or while I was speaking, Syl was in my ear and told me that we're halfway to our goal? 40% to our goal. So yes, give it up. 40% to our goal of 50 bands. You know what I say about that, Stimmy. I ain't even gonna press you with it. I'm not gonna press you. I'm just gonna let y'all know you got your Stimmy. We know it. Gimme. All right, we'll be back with more in a moment. Thanks, Jeff.
Keep fighting. You gonna make it through. Fight through the struggle. Yeah. Fighting through the struggle. 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 Fighting through the struggle.
Depression where I come from isn't normalized. You either hop off the porch or you get victimized. This is uncensored America, you see through my eyes. We see that black on black crime, police killing black lives. They try to patronize the youth by telling all these lies. They say refree, that's the only stuff they like to televise. Ain't stuff been civil since Martin Luther King's homicide. And ain't stuff been real woke since Malcolm X died. These people say they know loyalty, but they really don't. I don't need a group for validation, I've been on my own. Forget a counselor, rather pour my heart in a song. Then have a white lady sit down and tell me what she think is wrong. I had my closest friends turn you to my enemy. Better yet, my family undercoverly envy me. Demons, yeah, chasing me, trying to take my sanity. It's a World War II in my brain, it ain't humanity.
Fighting through the struggle. 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 Fighting through the struggle.
Hands up, don't shoot. Black men on mute. They killing us and searching us like we got some loot. You can cuff me, you can shoot me, but one thing you won't do is mute me. I'ma grind for my community, focus on the unity. Young black king searching for opportunity. See, it's hard, like my name's Spike Lee. Young activist, you know me. I'ma grind for the East. See, mama's crying, brothers dying. The white man, he's always lying. Look, understand this, you ain't never been in my shoes. Mama always told me to pay my dues. I'ma grind like my granny did. I'ma grind like my family did. Never give up, keep my head up. Look into the sky, dang God, man, I'm fed up.
Fighting through the struggle. 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 Fighting through the struggle.
Kobe Island, Moses. We do this for Xavier. We do this for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain. This ain't just for us. It's for everybody around us. We grinding, baby. We don't stop. Let's get it.
Make sure that you donate. We're just gonna keep pressing the line on that. You can go to mendingrootsforest.com/donate. to add your voice, but most importantly, put your money where your mouth is for a good cause. 200 trees that will be planted in Park Hill at the Park Hill Golf Course. And from that, we go to this, the music stylings of Menesport.
So I go by the name of Dunia Shawty. This is Timothy Horton, and we represent Menesport. Feel free to follow us there as well, too. This song is dedicated to all the women in the lives of all the children that have fallen, the mothers, the sisters, the cousins, aunties, friends. This one we dedicate to you. My skin is black. My arms are long. My hair is woolly. My back is strong. Strong enough to take the pain inflicted again and again. What do they call me? My name's ain't Sarah. My name's ain't Sarah. Ain't Sarah. My skin is yellow. My hair is long. Between two worlds, I do belong. My father was rich and white. He forced my mother late one night. What do they call me? My name's Saffronia. My name's Saffronia. I've been bleeding for a year now. My womb is humming a heavy tune and I'm singing backup. Being a woman is a career. Full-time, underpaid, overworked, and under-recognized. The woman arrives late, fashionably. Dressed to demand with plans in her hand, ready or not to take on the world, but the career comes with some challenges. Showing up where you said you would, even when it's cold and the sun's not in, and you're ready for the day to be over before it's begun. And because you stayed up all night holding wet pillows, convincing yourself that you did not binge watch your life instead of dreaming, and there just happens not to be a season 2. My skin is tan. My hair is fine. My hips invite you. My mouth like wine. Whose little girl am I? Yours if you have money to buy. What do they call me? My name is Sweet Thing. My name is Sweet Thing. My skin is brown. My manner is tough. I'll kill the first mother I see. My life has been rough. I'm awfully bitter these days because my parents were slaves. What do they call me? My name is Peaches. Looking out across the nighttime, the city winks asleep beside. Hear her voice shake my window, sweet seducing sighs. Get me out into the nighttime. Four walls won't hold me tonight. If this town is just an apple, then let me take a bite. If they say why, tell them that it's human nature. Why does he do me that way? And they say why, tell them that it's human nature. Why does he do me that way? Reaching out, touch a stranger. Electric eyes are everywhere. See that girl, she knows I'm watching. She likes the way I stare. And they say, why? Tell them that it's human nature. Why does he do me that way? And they say, why? Tell them that it's human nature. Why does he do me that way? I like living this way. Looking out across the morning, the city's hearts begin to beat. Reaching out, I touch her shoulder. I'm dreaming of the street, and they say why? Tell them that it's human nature. Why does he do me that way? Say why? Tell them that it's human nature. Why does he do me that way? And they say why? Does he do me that way? And they say, you tell me why? How does he live in that way? And they say why? Tell them that it's human nature. Does he do me that way? They say why? You say tell them that it's human nature. Why? And they say why? me that way. I like living this way. I love living this way. I might love in this way. I love living this way. I might live in this way.
Come on now. Human Nature, that's one of my favorite songs. Goodbye. You know what's funny, Toner, is that Sylvia, our producer, she's in my ear and she says, clap, make sure that you clap. I was already gonna do that, Sil.
That was mandatory. I was gonna stand up.
That was mandatory. I was already gonna do that. Thanks so much to Sport, Dunia and Timothy. Yes? Thank you guys very much for the music style. That was gorgeous. All right, so we'll step away for a second, and Toner and I will be back with more of the Mending Roots to Cultivate Communities telethon right here on Denver Community Media.